Good afternoon. This hearing of the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Strategic Forces will come to order. We will welcome you to our hearing, which will be on the President's FY17 budget request for the nation's nuclear forces. I want to thank our witnesses for being here and for all the time that they put into preparing for these hearings. I know it's a taxing process, but it's very helpful to us. We have with us today as witnesses the Honorable Robert Scher, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy, Plans, and Capabilities, Dr. Arthur Hopkins, who is performing the duties of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Defense Programs, General Robin Rand, Commander, Air Force Global Strike Command, and Vice Admiral Terry Benedict, Director, Navy Strategic Systems Programs. This is our third hearing on the budget request for FY17. At our first two hearings, we heard from your partners over at the Department of Energy and from senior leaders at STRATCOM and OSD. As my colleague and friend from Tennessee, Ranking Member Jim Cooper, said at both those hearings, we have a strong bipartisan agreement that nuclear deterrence is the nation's #1 priority defense mission, and we must recapitalize our nuclear forces. From the Secretary of Defense to the service secretaries and chiefs to the key leaders here in Congress, we're all in resounding agreement. Together, we know not only is this coming nuclear modernization affordable, it is the highest priority. And because it is our top priority, it will be robustly supported and funded, even if it comes at the expense of other capabilities. This is a hard-won bipartisan consensus on defense priorities and in a tremendously difficult budget environment. At the heart of this consensus is a collective understanding that these programs are not optional, that they are instead the foundation of U.S. security and international stability. And now we have to get on with the nitty-gritty of actually carrying out those programs. The Air Force and the Navy must request the funding necessary to manage the programs well, while Congress must do its part to authorize, appropriate, and oversee them. We will scrub your requests hard and press you equally hard to ensure you are managing them for efficiency and success. Together, I'm confident we will ensure the U.S. nuclear deterrent remains what Secretary Carter calls, quote, the bedrock of our security and the foundation for everything we do, close quote. Thank you again to our witnesses. I look forward to discussion. And with that, I'd like to turn to my friend and colleague from Tennessee, the Ranking Member, Mr. Cooper, for any opening statement he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, would like to welcome the witnesses. And since you quoted me in your opening statement, I can't think of no better words to use than the ones you did. But I'm proud to be part of this rare, perhaps unique oasis of bipartisanship in the United States Congress. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll now tell all the witnesses we'll accept your written statements for the record without objection, and we will recognize the witnesses to summarize their statements for 5 minutes each. We'll start with Secretary Scher. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Cooper, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the President's fiscal year 2017 budget requests as it relates to nuclear policy and strategy. While the administration's ultimate goal is a world without nuclear weapons, the President has been consistent and clear in his commitment to maintain a safe, secure, and effective nuclear arsenal for as long as nuclear weapons exist. Effective deterrence remains best served by sustaining the nuclear triad and dual-capable aircraft with the diverse range of nuclear explosive yields and delivery modes. The triad and DCA provide the credibility, flexibility, and survivability to meet and adapt to the challenges of a dynamic 21st century security environment without the need to mirror every potential adversary, system for system, and yield for yield. In addition to positioning us to address threats as they emerge, this approach, with its inherent flexibility, bolsters strategic stability by decreasing incentives for a future arms race. The President's nuclear sustainment and modernization plan is also consistent with his nonproliferation and disarmament objectives. It sustains a safe, secure, and effective nuclear deterrent, assures allies that they don't need their own nuclear arsenals, retains leverage for future arms control agreements, and reduces the numbers and types of weapons. The current stockpile is a dramatic departure from the Cold War. We have reduced from 23 nuclear warhead types in 1990 to 12 types today, and the B-6112 bomb life extension program is on track to allow us to reduce further to 6 warhead types by the mid-2020s. The B6112 will replace multiple existing variants that have different explosive yields. It will have lower yields than some of these variants, but will not expand the range of yield options available in the current stockpile. The B6112 will have a measure of improved accuracy as well to give it the same military capabilities as the higher yield bomb it replaces. My written testimony, as you know, it goes into greater detail on our modernization program and addresses the issues raised in your invitation letter to testify. But I was asked to focus in particular on the need for the Long-Range Standoff Missile, or the LRSO, to replace the aging Air-Launched Cruise Missile, or ALCM, and so I will focus on that for the remainder of my time today. The administration's decision to field a modern ALCM replacement is essential to maintain the ALCM's unique contribution to stable and effective deterrence. The current system is already decades beyond its planned service life, and its viability will be challenged over the next decade by advanced air defenses. Cruise missiles provide capabilities that complement rather than duplicate that of a stealth bomber. Standoff capability extends the effective range of our bomber fleet and complicates the air defense problem facing any country seeking to negate the air component of our deterrent. As air defense capabilities continue to improve and proliferate, we cannot assume our technological lead will forever ensure unchallenged U.S. bomber operations over any target in any theater. The ALCM provides an important contribution to the range of credible options available to the President for responding to nuclear attack. And because aircraft can be visibly deployed and flown during a crisis, they provide a forceful reminder to any adversary contemplating aggression that the risk it faces is real. The ability to respond proportionately to a limited nuclear attack strengthens our ability to deter such attacks in the first place. This is critical in a world where we must not only avoid unintended escalation, but also deter deliberate nuclear escalation like that envisioned in Russia's current strategy. Retaining a diverse range of nuclear response options does not mean a lower nuclear threshold or a higher likelihood of U.S. nuclear use. Indeed, the United States has long maintained a high threshold for nuclear use at the same time that we possess a diverse range of nuclear forces and response options. The LRSO will contribute to strategic stability by retaining a response option that does not pose the threat of a disarming surprise attack against Russia or China. The process of alerting strategic bombers is observable, and the aircraft and the missiles must spend hours flying towards their targets. Finally, the LRSO will utilize a refurbished version of the current ALCM warhead. The number of refurbished warheads will not exceed the current inventory of ALCM warheads and is far lower than the approximately 1,000 missile bodies needed to support the deployed force and testing requirements over the projected lifetime of the system. Let me conclude by reiterating that the administration's nuclear sustainment and modernization plan is necessary and it is affordable if prioritized appropriately by the Department, Congress, and the nation. Further delays to the program will put the safety, security, and effectiveness of our nuclear forces at significant and unacceptable risk. To be clear, our choice is not between keeping our current forces or modernizing them. Rather, the choice is between modernizing those forces or watching a slow and unacceptable degradation in our ability to deter. We look forward to this committee's continuing support of our collective efforts to ensure the United States is able to meet the security challenges we face today, as well as those ahead. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Secretary. Dr. Hopkins, you're recognized for 5 minutes to summarize your statement.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Ranking Member Cooper and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to discuss the Department's 2017 budget request for nuclear deterrent systems. In addition to serving as Principal Deputy Assistant for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Defense Programs, I'm the Acting Staff Director for the Nuclear Weapons Council. The Council provides an overarching, coordinated vision and strategy for the nuclear enterprise, including nuclear warheads and delivery platforms. It synchronizes the Department of Defense and energy efforts to ensure a safe, secure, reliable, and effective stockpile. The nation's nuclear forces are the Department's highest priority. The nuclear mission continues to be fundamental to our nation's security strategy, and it ensures that we maintain our extended deterrence commitments to our allies. The Nuclear Weapons Council has developed a strategic plan to integrate all three components of the nuclear enterprise: warheads, platforms, and infrastructure. Portions of the plan are underway, including production of the W-76-1 refurbished warhead and design engineering for the W-88 warhead modernization for the Navy's submarine-launched ballistic missiles, as well as the B-6112 bomb life extension for both strategic missions and extended deterrence. In fiscal year 2017, the National Nuclear Security Administration, NNSA, will continue to deliver W-76-1 warheads for the Navy's Trident II D5 missiles and will complete production in 2019. The W-88 warhead alteration effort, also for the D5 missile, is on schedule to deliver the first production unit in December 2019. The B-6112 bomb life extension program is also on schedule to deliver a first production unit in March of 2020. The B-6112 will enable a reduction in the total numbers and types of nuclear weapons in the stockpile. Modernizing our nuclear delivery platforms is also essential to nuclear deterrence. In fiscal year 17, the Defense Department plans to continue to fund several delivery systems. First, the Ohio-class submarine replacement and its Trident II D5 life extended missile. Second, sustainment of the Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile and its follow-on capability, the ground-based strategic deterrent. Third, upgrades to the B-2 and the B-52H heavy bombers. Fourth, the development of a long-range strike bomber, the B-21. And finally, the development of a long-range standoff cruise missile, the LRSO, to replace the aging air-launched cruise missile. The LRSO will complement penetrating bomber capability by extending its effective range and will complicate adversaries' air defense operations. With respect to the nation's nuclear enterprise, the Department's fiscal year 2017 budget addresses systemic issues that were identified in the 2014 enterprise reviews. The budget request includes resources to sustain and modernize our nuclear forces and ensure a safe, secure, and effective nuclear deterrent. The strategy also requires investment by the Department of Energy in nuclear infrastructure. The Department supports National Nuclear Security Administration's efforts to achieve a responsive infrastructure for our future stockpile. Our fiscal year 17 budget request is important for sustaining and revitalizing the nation's nuclear deterrent. We ask that you support both the Department of Defense and Department of Energy's budget requests in this area. My written testimony has more detail, and I ask that it be included in the record of this briefing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hopkins. General Rand, you recognize 5 minutes to summarize your statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Cooper and distinguished members of the committee. And thank you for allowing me to appear before you today to represent the men and women of Air Force Global Strike Command. As you know, Air Force Global Strike Command was created to provide a focus on the stewardship and operation of 2 legs of the nation's nuclear triad, while also accomplishing the conventional global strike mission. A key to our continued success will be our ability to modernize, sustain, and recapitalize our forces. Our mission set is always evolving and growing in order to ensure we continue to provide effective forces for those combatant commanders. Part of accomplishing this goal is to make sure we are right-sized with our manpower and resources in balancing those efforts with ongoing modernization and recapitalization programs. Our airmen in the missile fields are accomplishing a critical mission for this nation. They are operating, maintaining, and securing the most responsive leg of the nuclear triad. However, we must continue to efforts to modernize the Minuteman III weapon system where appropriate until we bring the ground-based strategic deterrent online. This is an absolute critical national interest that will provide strategic deterrence and, if needed, global strike for years to come. Additionally, I strongly endorse replacing the UH-1N in the most expeditious manner possible to ensure our missile field remains secure. Our diverse bomber forces made up of the B-1, B-2, and B-52 deter our potential adversaries and assure our allies across the globe. But when that is not enough, they execute a range of missions, including long-range global strike and close air support in theater. As you are aware, the B-1s have departed the CENTCOM AOR to help facilitate needed upgrades. These airmen have done an amazing job for many years, and I am proud of each and every one of them. Air Force Global Strike Command stands ready to support any combatant command with our other capable platforms to ensure there is no gap in requirements coverage. Therefore, I have directed our B-52 wings to be prepared to backfill the B-1s later this spring should we be asked to do so. As with our missile forces, we continue to look forward with our bomber forces. Last week, Secretary James revealed the designation for our newest bomber, the B-21. Both the B-21 and the long-range standoff weapon will ensure the United States can continue to hold any target at risk as potential adversaries continue to modernize their offensive and defensive capabilities. I'm aware that one of the big reasons I'm here today is to answer any questions on the command's progress in addressing the nuclear enterprise review findings. We have closed over 300 action items that complement the ongoing review efforts. We have reinvigorated ICBM operations and are effectively making positive cultural changes throughout the community. We have also overhauled the B-52 training and streamlined other aircrew programs. Additionally, Air Force Global Strike Command has been declared the lead command for Nuclear Command and Control Communications, or NC3, systems throughout the Air Force. And to recognize the absolute criticality of these systems, NC3 has been declared a weapon system, which means it is tracked, sustained, and modernized just like the rest of the weapon systems in our Air Force. But let me be clear, we are not done. Culture change is not something that you can just flip a switch on. We must foster a culture where we aren't afraid to question how things are done. Innovative airmen should have the way to push their idea to the top, and I will not lose sight of how far we have come, but also that we never stop working together. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to appear before the committee to highlight the great airmen of Air Force Global Strike Commander. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General. Admiral Benedict, you're recognized for 5 minutes to summarize your statement.
Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Cooper, distinguished members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before the Subcommittee on Strategic Forces. My mission as the Director of Strategic Systems Programs is to design, develop, produce, support, and ensure the safety and security of our Navy's strategic deterrent capability, the Trident II D5 strategic weapon system. This afternoon, I would like to talk about 3 specific areas: nuclear weapons safety and security, the Trident II D5 life extension efforts, and collaboration with the Air Force on weapon system commonality. First, my top priority is and always will be the safety and the security of the Navy's nuclear weapons. Custody and accountability of the nuclear assets entrusted to the Navy are the cornerstones of this program. Our approach to the nuclear weapons mission is to maintain a culture of excellence and self-assessment that produces the highest standards of performance and integrity. Second, the Navy is proactively taking steps to address aging and technology obsolescence. SSP is extending the life of the Trident II D5 strategic weapon system to match the Ohio-class submarine service life and to serve as the initial baseline mission payload for the Ohio replacement submarine platform. This is being accomplished through a life extension program for all of the Trident II D5 strategic weapon subsystems, to include launcher, navigation, fire control, guidance, missile, and reentry. In November of 2015, the USS Kentucky conducted her demonstration and shakedown operation, launching 2 D5 life extension missiles, marking 157 out of 159 successful launches over the last 26 years. This milestone continues to ensure a sustainable sea-based strategic deterrent capability. Finally, I fully support strategic collaboration between the services. The Navy and the Air Force are both addressing challenges in sustaining aging strategic weapon systems. As a result, I remain committed to my belief that commonality between the ground-based strategic deterrent and the Trident II D5 will improve affordability while reducing risks to ensure a safe, secure, effective, and credible nuclear deterrent. 9 joint teams have identified numerous opportunities where commonality has the potential to reduce not only cost, but also risk in the upcoming Air Force GBSD program, as well as the follow-on D5 Navy effort. I am concerned that without proactive leadership involvement, we will miss the opportunity to take advantage of the team's effort as we transition to execution. Leadership commitment and focus are required to accomplish this undertaking and ensure its success. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and at this time I'd be pleased to take your answers, sir, your questions.
Thank Thank you, Admiral Benedict. I'll now recognize myself for the first series of questions. General Rand, you made reference in your opening statement to the Minuteman III system, and we know it's got 1970s technology and it's degrading quickly, but you also know there are critics out there who are saying that we should slip the GBSD program to make this nuclear modernization bill a little bit more manageable. I don't agree with that thinking, but I'm interested in your thoughts on the matter.
Sir, I agree with you. I believe that we need to continue to fund for the GBSD and have it meet a fully operational capability no later than 2030. My large reason for that is the Minuteman III with each year becomes more and more obsolete, and I'm concerned that if we don't replace it, that the enemy gets a vote and we will not be able to provide the capabilities that are needed with the current system.
Talk about that. Why would it be cheaper just to have a new system as opposed to just indefinitely life extending the Minuteman III?
I'm not the expert, but I believe any SLEPs that you would do on the Minuteman III would be very costly, and it won't give us the enhancements that we need that keeps us on the leading edge. So we spend the money, but we don't get the benefit of the modernized and improved capabilities.
Secretary Scher and Dr. Hopkins, why is the administration proposing to pursue the LRSO cruise missile, particularly if the U.S. will already have a penetrating bomber and the B-61 nuclear gravity bomb? Secretary Scher, you start.
The importance of having both the ability to have a penetrating bomber with a gravity bomb, as well as having LRSO be able to be from that same platform, is that it complicates the adversary's planning. Also, we can't expect that always we will be able to circumvent any advanced air defense systems from any adversary, so having the ability to launch from standoff ranges will be important. And further, I'd like to present the President with multiple options within his air leg that don't include mandating that it must be a manned bomber overflying enemy territory with a gravity bomb.
Dr. Hopkins, do you have anything to offer?
I would agree with those three reasons. In particular, like to emphasize the need for survivability and penetration. We don't know how sophisticated enemy defenses are going to be 10, 20, 30 years from now, and having that capability is very important to us for flexibility.
Well, as y'all know, some people are calling the LRSO destabilizing. Obviously, the administration doesn't share that viewpoint. Can you enlighten us on the administration's perspective?
Absolutely, Congressman. First, this is not creating a new capability that is suddenly destabilizing. Having an air-launched cruise missile is something that we have in the force now, is a capability that exists, and I would argue it is not being seen as destabilizing up to this point. So one that is a survivable one, I believe, is actually continues the same capability and hence is not destabilizing. I'd also note that using this leg of the triad, in fact, is one that is most easily seen by any potential adversary. You must generate the bomber force. It then has to fly, as I said, for hours. So it is a well-known and well-seen and observable piece of the arsenal and the triad, which I think it means to me that it is not a destabilizing weapon unto itself. Having a weapon that is not able to penetrate enemy airspaces, frankly, I would argue is far more destabilizing, and not knowing what is going to be effective and what isn't. So we really need to modernize this piece of the air triad.
Staying on this same subject, General Rand, what is your professional military opinion on why we need the LRSO?
Mr. Chairman, I think it's absolutely critical that we have an LRSO, not only for the new B-21, but also for our B-2 and B-52. And that is largely because of the ever-increasing anti-access aerial denial that we are facing. And for survivability, we need to have a standoff capability, period, dot.
Are you and the Air Force taking this requirement and putting it into program plans?
Absolutely, sir. It's fully funded through the FIDEP.
When do you expect it to be fielded?
Sir, the first one NNSA, my understanding from General Klotz, was delivery in 2025, and we will get our first one. We're tracking for 2026.
Great, thank you. Secretary Scher, we're putting a series of charts from DOD, CBO, and CSIS up on the screens that show the so-called bow wave of spending that's coming on nuclear modernization. I'd like to introduce those charts for the record without objection, so ordered. While spending on nuclear recapitalization will no doubt increase as we head into 2020s, takeaways from these charts is that, one, spending on the nuclear weapons will remain around 7% of the budget, even as we peak in the 2020s, which is far less than historical norms. And two, the bow wave for modernization spending on nuclear forces is actually small as a fraction of the overall bow wave of modernization spending on conventional weapons. Secretary Scher, does the Obama administration believe 7% of our defense budget for a decade or so is a price worth paying for nuclear deterrence?
As you said, Chairman, the nuclear mission is the #1 priority. Affordability is about prioritization. We certainly have sufficient amount of money in the Defense Department budget to ensure that we can fund the #1 priority for the Defense Department. So I don't see this as a problem in any respects. Having said that, there is no doubt that there is a lot of acquisition coming down the pike, and we must understand the implications of that. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that one of the things that makes it clear that we need to have cooperation between the administration and the Congress to ensure we don't return to BCA levels as is currently looked at, because that will simply exacerbate these problems. But even under that scenario, you fund your #1 priority.
I like the way that sounds. I'd also like to introduce for the record a short paper with quotes from senior Obama administration officials and military leaders about why they believe nuclear deterrence is the #1 priority mission for DOD and why they say it will be funded even if at the expense of capabilities and other capabilities and programs. Without objection, so ordered. Now I will recognize the gentleman from Tennessee for any questions he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First question to both Admiral Benedict and General Rand has to do with the commonality of the D5 and the ground-based deterrent. What further progress is needed to get to where we need to be on these common components that could be used by both the Navy and the Air Force? Is there consensus on this between the Navy and the Air Force?
Sir, there is. Secretary Kendall directed the Air Force and the Navy to work with Draper and to continue to exhaust all avenues to make sure we can find every area that there can be commonality. We are committed to doing that, and I know of no roadblocks that's interfering with the progress we're making.
Sir, as I stated in my opening statement, we had a series of teams, joint teams this summer, Navy, Air Force, that identified numerous opportunities. The General pointed out one, which is the guidance subsystem. There are many others. We continue to explore those opportunities. I will tell you that Major General Scott Jansen, who's the PEO for GBSD, he and I have a VTC tomorrow. We will approve that final report and submit that up the leadership chain to include Admiral Haney on that chain. And as the General said, we'll continue to press to find ways to ensure that those opportunities are properly executed in the upcoming contracts.
Admiral Benedict, you'd called in your testimony for proactive leadership on this question. So I hope we will continue to see that, and I hope if there's any wrinkle or blip here that you promptly notify the subcommittee, because we're very interested in this commonality issue.
Yes, sir.
Another question for both General Rand and Admiral Benedict. It's my understanding that the Air Force, unlike the Navy, is giving up on the personal reliability program and substituting instead this sort of right-to-arm standard, which would enable more servicemen to be able to guard nuclear weapons. But I've always been a fan of the personal reliability program, and relaxing a standard doesn't sound like the best way to make sure our nuclear weapons are safe, secure, and reliable. So can you explain why the Air Force is relaxing the standard?
Yes, sir. I would humbly submit we're not relaxing the standard. Out of one of the independent reviews, the Welsh-Harvey review, the recommendation is that the arming use of force and the PRP, with a few tweaks to the arming use of force, could be identical to PRP, and we have actually taken the arming use of force, added 2 criteria to it that puts it on par with PRP, and now we have administratively lessened the load on for our security forces, and only for our security forces. Everyone else that still is involved in the nuclear enterprise is on PRP. So the arming use of force in the PRP, the medical requirements, the physical fitness, the emotional requirements are identical.
You've used the word identical twice, but we have to change it to keep it identical. There's a certain irony there. There were almost 1,000 incidents in the last several decades of problems with securing nuclear weapons by the U.S. Air Force. So I hope and pray that this new standard will be as you suggest, and just as tough.
It is, sir.
Well, and we have your word on that.
You have my word on that.
So-
And if it's not, then, and we find that it's not, we will revert back to the PRP, but we have run very judicious and cautious testing to make sure we did not rush to failure on that, and we are implementing it as we speak across the nuclear wings, again, only for our security forces. In the Army, use of force has the same requirements for them as does PRP.
Well, time will tell. Admiral Benedict, we understand that the success of some Department of Navy programs hinge on the department's ability to develop strong partnerships and collaborate with state and local government agencies, such as local law enforcement and emergency response agencies. Acknowledging this need to collaborate, we also recognize that it must be challenging for the Navy to ensure protection of data that is shared with state and local agencies in an age when information flows so freely through email and other media platforms. Could you please describe some of the challenges that your program faces as it seeks to balance the need to partner and collaborate with state and local agencies with the need to protect sensitive information?
Yes, sir. Thank you. We have seen this as more of a challenge here of recent. While we believe in absolute transparency with the state and local governments to ensure that they fully understand how we are protecting and safeguarding the operations within our naval bases, we also fully appreciate our responsibility and accountability to protect sensitive information. And so as we've been honoring FOIA requests and appropriately adjudicating those requests, what we have found is that some organizations, some individuals have identified an easier path through the state and local governments in which we've been sharing some of that information. So we've been working with Chairman Rogers and with your staff identifying some of these issues that we now face, and we've been getting great support in attempting to ensure that, again, very classified sensitive information is clearly transmitted to those who should have it, but is also protected from other inappropriate or inadvertent uses. So we'll continue to work with your staffs, and I think there is an opportunity here for us to address this very sensitive issue.
Well, thank you. It's very important that we protect such sensitive information. Finally, General Rand, you'd mentioned in your testimony that the Air Force missile program has been reinvigorated, but still more needs to be done. Are you confident that morale of the missileers can be restored? And do you need additional resources to do that? And I hope that your relaxation of the personal responsibility program is not part of your morale boost.
No, sir. I actually, if I may, just clarify a point. Currently, we make up 12% of all the security forces in the United States Air Force are assigned to Air Force Global Strike, and that's a fairly large percentage. And of that, right now, our 75% of our security forces are first-term airmen on their first assignment. I find that a little unsettling, and I know now that we're using the Army use of force, which has the same standards of PRP, that all security forces now will be eligible for missile duty. That's a good news story in the sense that I'll have a better experienced force out there in my missile fields. As far as morale, that was not one of the areas that we considered at all to improve morale was PRP. This was more of an efficiency and what we feel is a security and surety measure. There's multiple things we're doing with the culture. It is not a light switch I can turn on and off, but I'm very impressed by the caliber of our young men and women who serve in the missile fields. Certainly, we're doing numerous things for our missile crew members to ensure that they're a clear understanding of their role. what they play in the areas that we can improve to help career develop them. And I think we've got numerous initiatives that are underway. But I can't take a lieutenant and turn him or her into a lieutenant colonel or a colonel overnight. So this will take time for these to take root.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no more questions. Yeah.
Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Kaufman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Rand, should we review the missile warning and NC3 capabilities as legs of the triad? I'm sure should review. Have we been paying enough attention to missile warning and its enablers? Are you comfortable with the plan to evolve these capabilities, and that the department will stick with it to ensure a survivable capability?
Sir, I don't want to give you an incomplete answer. If I may, I will take that for the record. I believe that NC3 in itself is addressing numerous shortfalls in the communication piece of on potentially our nation's worst day. And there are many areas that this covers. Having it now declared a weapon system, while I don't own all those parts of the weapon system, having a single belly button that is accountable and reportable and has the authority to work with my fellow major command commanders, as well as the combatant commanders, as well as the Joint Staff and the Office of Secretary of Defense, I think will pay great dividends. But as particular to your missile warning, sir, I need to research that and get back to you and the members.
You might have to get back on this one too. What key investments do we need to make to ensure our missile warning system is robust? What major investments are you planning for FY17 and over the next 5 years?
Sir, I will. I will get back to you then. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I don't have that information.
I understand. I yield back.
Thank you, Chair, and I recognize Mr. Ashford for 5 minutes. Then Mr. Larson is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Scher, are you going to be here in 2040?
I don't plan on it.
I don't plan on it either. You going to be here next year?
I serve at the pleasure of this president.
So how can you say with confidence beyond January 20th of next year that this modernization budget will stay whole?
I can tell you what the 5-year plan that was approved by the department and then submitted to the president says. So that is the plan as of now. Certainly any plan can change and someone else can, but I know that we have the ability to fund within a balanced defense program, given the top line that we hope to be able to get from the Congress and the administration through. So I feel comfortable about those figures. As for, but certainly, as you note, Congressman, things can change.
Yeah, and one thing that seems to have changed is last year I asked Admiral Haney this question, so it was in a response, a letter he had sent to the committee saying that our planned recapitalization activities will require close to 10% of the DoD budget for a period of time. I think he then testified to 7, although that was based on some questions we asked him as opposed to another analysis. So you heard the chairman talk about 7%. Is it 7? Is it 10? Is it something in between? Is it a multiple of?
The difficulty in giving you a percentage of a budget is that I don't feel confident that I know what that budget top line is. So giving you a percentage of that is difficult. What I do feel confident about is that we have what our program is. And, so again, I feel confident what we've put up is 3.3% of the budget for FY17, which is $19 billion. In the FY17 to 21 plan, it's $31 billion for DoD modernization. So I feel comfortable and confident about those numbers as they stand. But in terms of percentage and where it's going, that would require me to be prescient on a number of different issues that I think are difficult to do. Having said that, under most assumptions, I don't see, none of the projections seem to have it above that 7% kind of frame, But again, I hesitate to even mention it, in part because I have no doubt that when neither you or I nor are here in 2040, that someone will raise this issue of not knowing the top lines and having the wrong percentages.
If I'm here in 2040, the country has other problems, that's for sure. But this is something I'm just asking everyone about because of the challenges that we would face for the entire nuclear enterprise. And then Admiral Benedict's testimony it doesn't address the issue, but he recognizes the issue that so long as everything works out, then everything will work out. But our history with MDAPs is that they usually don't. That we usually end up over budget and things take too long, and we end up dealing with the Department of Defense that finds ways to add things onto the platforms we've approved, because why not do it now when we have the money? Well, it turns out we don't do it now because we usually don't have the money. So we're going to just continue to ask these questions of the department on nuclear modernization because I will go out on a limb and I will say it won't be 7%. It'll be something much higher because that's what history says will happen at the department. Thanks. Appreciate it. Yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Brooks, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations on your rather close victory last night. 50 points. I'm going to give you the questions first, give you some time to think about it, go through some economic background, then repeat the questions and ask you to answer them. The question is going to be is, what can we in Congress do to get more bang for the buck out of our defense dollars, efficiency measures, things of that nature, or on the alternative, what mission scopes should we reduce? And I ask you to focus on your particular areas of expertise on the one hand, or if you've got broader things related to the Pentagon and what DOD does, that'd be wonderful. And I ask that question in this context. Y'all may remember Admiral Mike Mullen, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In 2010 and 2011, he sat at that same spot where you guys are now, and he told us that America's greatest national security threat was our deficit and debt. And I think you've seen with sequestration and whatnot how he was very prophetic in his remarks. Unfortunately, over the past couple of months, it appears that our deficit and debt situation has taken a rather dramatic turn for the worse. Since I was elected in 2010, every year we've decreased our deficits. Now the CBO is warning us that our deficit for this year is apt to increase by about $105 billion to $544 billion. Worse yet, long term, the CBO is warning us that our debt service costs are going to go up roughly $600 billion over the next decade. That's per year. $600 billion, as you know, is about what we spend on national security. That money's going to have to come from someplace. Additionally, the CBO is warning us that a decade from now, we're going to be looking at $1 trillion deficits in perpetuity until such time as we essentially go bankrupt or insolvent as a nation, with the rather severe adverse consequences that would bring to us. So we're going to have to make some hard decisions. That being the case, what efficiency measures do you think we ought to be implementing with your insight and expertise, or in the alternative, what mission scopes should we start discarding or reducing in order to be able to meet the kind of financial pressures America is going to face in the future? Don't everybody speak at once.
Congressman, first I agree, and I think you have likely heard or seen that Secretary Carter agrees that we have to understand a couple of things. One, the importance of an overall budget and that the Defense Department has a responsibility to be as careful and responsible with the funds that we have, because we have to prove that we are using effectively every dollar that is given to us by the Congress and by the American people, and that we must ensure that the other parts of the United States have strong budgets and support, because we are only as strong as the people that we can recruit in terms of the education system, in terms of foreign diplomacy and aid. So I think there's a true understanding within the leadership of the Department of Defense that we will never, we can't have a budget that is out of proportion and misaligned with the rest of the the importance of the rest of the United States government. Having said that, we believe we use the money as efficiently as possible, and we go through a process every year of revalidating the amounts of money and how we spend it to ensure that we can deal with the threats that we see in the security environment, to continue to serve our interests and propagate those interests and secure our national security and the friends and allies. We believe we put together the most efficient way of doing that, the most effective way of doing that within the context, in this case, of the budget agreement that was agreed to by the Congress and the President. So our role is to ensure that it is strategically guided in terms of dealing with the largest threats to the United States, and that we do that as efficiently as possible. There are lots of discussions about which mission and where, but I think the Secretary has been very clear how he sees this being guided, and that the focus is on ensuring that we can deal with the 5 threats that he has articulated, dealing with a resurgent Russia, dealing with a rising China.
Excuse me, Secretary Scher, I've only got 30-something seconds left.
Sorry.
Do you have any specific recommendations for this Congress, actions we should take to make our security costs more efficient or to reduce mission scope?
I think we have done our proposal on the budget is what we think is the most efficient way of doing it. The main thing is to continue to be able to have secured funding and predictable funding in the out years.
Thank you, and I see that my time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. I also like to recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Gary Mendy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some of this has been reviewed, but I'd like to go back and try to dig a little deeper on it. This goes to you, Mr. Scher. Most of the estimates that we've seen with regard to the entire nuclear programs really go out 5 years. But yet the bow wave, interesting word to be used, seems to occur beyond 5 years. Do you have estimates of the cost beyond 5 years? And if so, can you share those specific estimates with them, with us, system by system and bomb by bomb?
We have some figures and some charts that I know we have shared with you. I suspect they lack the level of precision that you are requesting.
Totally. Not partial, but totally.
We do have very clear projections for 5 years. As we go out, honestly, those projections even in the greatest of granularity become harder and harder to make sure that we are confident about those numbers, based in large part upon some of the things that Mr. Larson has mentioned. So we have some estimates and in the acquisition side that I don't know if we have the level of granularity you're going to look for, but we will certainly be happy to go. I will be happy to go back, and I don't know if Dr. Hopkins has additional information to go back and see what level of granularity we can provide.
Are there, at some point within the next 5 years, the granularity will become more obvious, and perhaps to the point where the granules are sufficient to trip over? Do you have milestones in mind at which point decisions would be made as to whether it is wise to continue any one of the programs or?
In terms of the commitment to the program, we remain committed to all of the modernization of the program, and I believe it is critical to ensure that we modernize each leg of the triad as we have talked about. We understand that as we get closer, we will continue to get more granularity for it, but at no point in time is the policy of this administration to stop any of the modernization programs. They are affordable if they are prioritized.
That's the most remarkable statement I've ever heard. Well, with regard to priorities then, this committee and its subcommittees have gone through hearing after hearing from other branches of the department, and their priorities cannot be met given the current budgets of the department. And it would seem to me that therefore the priorities would be for us to shift money from everything else to meet their priorities, and what you say is absolutely cannot change. that is, these priorities. Puts us in an interesting circumstance, wouldn't you say?
The Secretary and the President determine what the priorities for the department are. The Secretary, I think, has been pretty clear that he views the nuclear enterprise as a priority, and hence he makes the final
We're
decision.
going round and round, and there's not much value in that. So if I might just kind of change the course here. Down to specifics. General Rand, your new ground-based strategic deterrent. Do you know what it's going to cost 5 years out?
5 years after the FIDEP? Is that the question, sir?
That's correct.
I don't have the granularity that you are requesting at this time.
Then can you tell me why the existing missiles cannot be used in 20 years?
I certainly
Cannot
may.
be rebuilt, cannot be refurbished?
Sure. We previously stated that I believe that the system will have a difficult time surviving in the active A2 AD environment that we will be dealing with in the 2030 and beyond time period.
So that is the warhead itself or the missile itself will not be able to achieve its destination.
Yes, sir, that is my contention.
And the new missile could?
Yes, sir, that is our contention.
It would seem to me, Mr. Chairman, that we may want to find out how that could be achieved.
And I do believe we'll have a closed session to talk in more detail.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I look forward to that in the closed session as well. Now I go to a gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Fleming, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General Rand, as Commander of Global Strike Command, I know you have a deep understanding of the significance of nuclear weapons and have a vital understanding of the deterrent effect. And I just parenthetically, we're so blessed to have you as our first four-star in command of Global Strike, and I hope you find that accommodations in Shreveport and Bossier City are satisfactory. But anyway, aside from all that, let's talk about something that maybe is less obvious but can be even more important, and that's the culture of deterrence. I'm concerned that through the day we have an entire generation of young airmen performing nuclear operations that have little appreciation for the special significance that these weapons have. The threat of nuclear aggression could still persist beyond the Cold War and is indeed different and arguably more diffuse and unpredictable. I think most of that's more important than ever that we're taking steps to impart the special significance and understanding in today's generation of airmen. So my question is this: what efforts are underway right now in the Air Force to strengthen deterrence education research for airmen performing that nuclear mission?
Thank you, sir. That's a great question. I'm glad I get to comment. As my good friend Terry Benedict mentioned, commonality. We talk weapon systems. One of the things we need to do is find commonality between the services. We are doing that. We have an exchange program with some of our 13N young captains and majors are in exchange with the Navy right now. This past summer, we started our schools of advanced nuclear deterrence studies, where we have 8 majors, 04 field grade officers that are at Albuquerque, New Mexico for a 12-month study. That program will continue to grow, where we'll be bringing 12 to 15. We will bring different career fields other than nuclear expertise. We'll also be bringing in different services, and we'll be bringing in on the fringes some partner nations that will attend. One of the areas that we're doing is looking at career broadening for our missile and bomber pilots. I'm presently looking at trying to expand assignment opportunities for our missile crews, where they can go and serve in places in Europe where we have the dual capable aircraft missions, and we can get them in their plans. So there are multiple programs. And then the last one with folks that have helped us build a series of strategic deterrent courses that we have called a Nuclear Deterrence 100 up to 400 series, which the 400 is for general officers and senior executive service personnel, all the way down to 100, which is for our sessions in people and everything in between. Sir, I could go on for a the rest of this session if you would like, but I think that
Please
gives
don't,
you a
because
hint.
I've got less than 2 minutes. So, but I thank you for that. It sounds like it's very robust, and I appreciate that there is a lot behind that. You know, we put language in the NDAA to look at that, and I think we're expecting a report. I assume that this is sort of a preview of that report.
Sir, and I will send you personally some of the initiatives, all the initiatives that we have.
Okay, very good. Well, in the time I have left, I'm also concerned about the Nuclear Command and Control, N3. And I'm a little, to be honest with you, it's a little ambiguous as to, is this spread over 4 commands as we're understanding, or is this really controlled in a singular sort of silo? Can you explain that for me?
Certainly. The Nuclear Command and Control Communications is a system of systems, and if I could, there's approximately 107 systems that would make up what we'd call NC3. The Air Force is responsible for 63 of those 107 different systems. And we have found that the best way to manage this is to put it in a singular major command, and that is now Air Force Global Strike. But I have to be very collaborative with my fellow major commanders. For example, some of these systems reside in Space Command. The FAB-T, for example. The NAOC E-4B resides presently in Air Combat Command. But the issue of how do you have responsibility without authority, a lot of the authority will come through the budget, and that I will have budgetary oversight of how dollars are spent in accord with these programs. And we are getting significant top cover and support from the OSD and Mr. Halverson specifically and CIO. And so I think, sir, that potentially, if I may, late to need, but we are actually pedaling very, very hard to make sure that we address the shortfalls that currently exist in many of our NC3 overall weapon system.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And my time's up. I yield.
Thank you, gentlemen. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Montana, Mr. Zinke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to attend the hearing today. I guess where I want to turn to is the helicopters. And the reason why I'm out in Montana, I tour the facilities, and the airmen came up to me, knowing I was a former SEAL, and they had some concerns about the UH-1s, the Hueys. And looking at the inventory, what we have out there, and doing a little research, our staff tried to find some alternatives that were cost-effective. We looked at the Navy helicopters, we looked at everything, and it seems to be that we do need to replace the helicopters because they're at a concern with alert. Admiral Haney also suggests that. And I guess my question to you is, in previous budgets, did we look at using sole source acquisition to replace these, and what were the options that were presented before us? And Dr. Hopkins?
I'm not aware of any previous attempts to use sole source arrangements. However, I can say that from within the Office of the Secretary of Defense, we have assured the Air Force that they have the authorities they need to do procurement in whatever fashion that is necessary to get the helicopters out in the most expedient manner possible.
And General Rand, you're aware of I'm sure the Secretary of Air Force's letter to Chairman Rogers that expressed they really can't, because they have failed a couple exercises in there, and there's a concern that they can't fulfill their alert duty with the UH-1s.
Sir, there's 2 requirements that we have real briefly, and I won't belabor this. We have the convoy escort duty for when we're moving the warhead to and from the launch facility to base and vice versa. The other requirement that the combatant requirement is to provide an emergency security response team. With mitigation efforts that we've put in place with the UH-1N, we're arming the helicopter right now. We've put some refueling capabilities out in the missile alert facilities. We will be able to do the convoy effort, I think, safely and effectively until the replacement for the UH-1N comes on board. We will not meet the emergency security response with the present helicopter. And so there is no seam between myself and Admiral Haney on the need for a replacement helicopter, and there's no seam with the United States Air Force on the need to replace that. And in this current budget, we have $1 billion right now that is allocated to replacing that. And we are finalizing our acquisition strategy as we speak. And I strongly recommend to the Secretary and the Chief that we do the most expeditious manner possible to get a replacement out to the missile fields.
Well, thank you, General. And as a taxpayer and an individual that's in charge of now looking at taxpayers, and I look at present programs out there as a former SEAL, I know there's some contracts out there that I would encourage you to find not only the most expeditious way, but also a way that's most cost-effective. And I can't believe that the Black Hawk, given my experience, cannot meet this role. So I would encourage you to look at what's out there, and certainly on the Black Hawk, if it fills a mission and we have contracts out there that we can add on top of it without reinventing the wheel, I would strongly encourage that. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield my time back.
Ready? Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Franks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for being here. And with great deference to the civilians here, let me express, as I always do, a special appreciation to those who wear the uniform. General Rand, you know, you and I have been friends a long time. I am grateful for men like you that dedicate their lives to the cause of freedom, and know that my children, as I've said to you many times in private, have a better chance of walking in the light of freedom because people like you that do what you do, and I'm grateful to all of you.
Thank you, sir.
With that, Mr. Scher and Dr. Hopkins and General Rand, why has the President, in your mind, I'll start with you, Dr. Scher, Mr. Scher, why has the President consistently supported the ICBM leg of our triad, and why does that continue to be relevant from your perspective?
Congressman, I think, first of all, the President's determination is, from a broad perspective, that the triad is important. It brings flexibility across a range. It brings hedges within and amongst all of the different elements. So that in and of itself is an important piece. The ICBM leg, as certainly you know, sir, is the most responsive of the legs and ensures that no adversary can believe that they can have a strike that immediately eliminates all of our capabilities to respond. So from a policy perspective, those are the key elements of why the ICBM force is so important.
Well, as you might imagine, I couldn't agree with you more.
Mr. Franks, I would just add the attribute of survivability. The ICBM force does provide an enduring capability to respond, and it really does discourage attacks on the United States.
General Rand?
Sir, they covered it. We have, as you know, 24/7 alert right now of great young men and women that are in our missile silos performing, I think, a tremendous duty for our country.
General Rand, I might sort of elaborate on the question. You know, Mr. Scher mentioned the word responsive, and certainly I think that's correct, but sometimes we hear the characterization that our nuclear forces, particularly our ICBMs, are on hair trigger alert. This is at least the phrase that I hear a lot. Many are suggesting that we, quote, take our ICBMs off alert. And would you agree with that, and why would you think that might be a good or bad idea?
Sir, I don't agree with that. My personal opinion is that our enemies sleep with one eye open at night because of the men and women in the missile fields.
Well, I just wanted to get that on record. Obviously, I agree with that. Admiral Benedict, what is the minimum number of Ohio-class replacement submarines that are required to fulfill STRATCOM's requirement for sea-based deterrence? And you know, the Navy and STRATCOM and DoD have been very clear on this, and I wonder if you'd explain why less than 12 doesn't meet the requirement.
Sir, the number is 12. You stated that correctly. That is the program of record for the Ohio Replacement Program, and essentially throughout the entire life cycle of that platform, we've done the analysis. We need 12 to make 10, where 10 is the requirement to support Admiral Haney's mission statement at STRATCOM.
Well, let me ask you, and don't know if we'll get through the whole thing, so General Rand, I'll start with you again. If there was any one thing that you believe that right now we should have particular focus on in terms of our strategic capability, would there be anything that you would emphasize?
Sir, I think that the balance of where we're focusing right now for me is with our bomber recapitalization modernization, along with our modernization and / the development of the GBSD, that those two fit like a glove, and it's important that we have parallel efforts on both those.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to do something really rare and give back about 30, 40 seconds here and thank all of you for your gallant commitment to human freedom.
I thank the gentleman. Chair now recognizes Chairman Forbes from Virginia for 5 minutes.
Chairman, thank you. Gentlemen, with so much, I'm following a line of Mr. Frank's questions, and with so much focus on the next generation of command and control infrastructure, launch platforms, and next generation missiles, how confident are we that our current fleet of the Ohio-class submarines and their support networks will be able to maintain our technical advantage over the rest of the world until the Ohio replacement comes online?
Sir, I would say we're very comfortable, although I think you're well aware, sir, from your position as chairman, that those platforms are aging. We're going to take the Ohio-class submarine to a life that we've never, within the Navy, experienced before. I know that within Naval Sea Systems Commands, naval reactors, and the entire shipboard community, we are watching those platforms very, very carefully. Maintenance is a challenging experience within those platforms. It's growing, but I think that we have the right emphasis from the top down, from the CNO, from Mr. Stackley, to ensure that we're appropriately funded to address that, get those through their 42-year life history or planned experience, and then bring the Ohio replacement on to the program of record to ensure that we can meet the 12 submarine platforms necessary to support Admiral Haney.
Good. Is there anything Congress can or should do to strengthen our current nuclear triad to ensure that we're ready to face any global challenges in the immediate future and are ready in the event of any delay in future replacement programs?
I'll go first. Sure, I think that just recently both Mr. Stackley as well as the CNO have testified what they believe they need in order to execute the Ohio replacement program as cost efficiently as possible. Things such as economic order quantity, advanced construction authorization, incremental funding, class procurement, things like that, right? They've just recently been up on the Hill.
And are those things contained in the Sea-Based Deterrent Fund?
I believe those authorizations are, sir.
Okay.
We need those types of authorizations and relief so that we can deliver within the cost budgets that we've agreed to in order to hold those platforms to an economical order quantity.
Sir, I think the key for the Air Force is that we get appropriated and approval, authorization for the PB, the budget in FY17 and through the fight up, and then I think we need reprieve from the Budget Control Act.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, gentleman. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Bridenstine, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Scher, as a policy matter, what should an adversary know if it thinks about attacking our missile warning or nuclear command and control satellites or ground links?
So certainly the pieces of the nuclear enterprise that you've mentioned are critical parts to our ability to be able to assess and respond to any adversary. However, I would argue those attacks are as serious as any attack on any U.S. facility, any U.S. service member, any part of the United States. So equally, the key piece of deterrence is ensuring that the adversary understands that the risks that come from taking that action will far outweigh any advantage they believe they can accrue by taking such action. It doesn't matter what it is, but the NC3 and those pieces are critically important.
Is the adversary crossing a red line by attacking systems designed to maintain situational awareness during a nuclear conflict?
the adversary should not believe that by attacking anything, I'm, Congressman, uncomfortable with constraining options for red lines and others, but attacking those facilities are critically sensitive, and it's understood and needs to be understood by the adversaries that that is something that will not be allowed to remain.
Do we have a declaratory policy on this?
We do not have a specific declaratory policy on that, but I think the overall declaratory policy contains references to, I mean, that looks at the whole range of our nuclear enterprise.
I just received an outbrief from the latest Schriever war game. I was interested if you have received that brief, or maybe if you attended the war game itself.
I did not attend and haven't actually seen the outbrief of that one, sir.
So the Deputy Secretary of Defense attended, and I would highly recommend you do as well.
We'll do so.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I'd like to ask one final question before we go to the classified section. Secretary Scher, the New START treaty doesn't expire till 2021. At that point, there's an option for a 5-year extension if Russia and the U.S. agree. Since we're 5 years away from that expiration, is there any reason to trigger that extension now, especially since Russia is cheating on the INF, the Open Skies Treaty, and has never been in compliance with the chemical weapons or biological weapons conventions?
I think there is, first of all, I will note that Russia at this point continues to abide by the New START treaty. And the reason we went into the New START treaty with the Russians is that we saw it in our interest to do so. And I'd argue that that treaty is still working for our interests in terms of constraining the number of deployable weapons from Russia. Whether or not it's in our interest to extend it, I think is a decision that that's a policy decision that people will be considering. But I do think it should be looked at in isolation of whether or not it still serves our interest, since the Russians are still adhering to that treaty.
All right. That's debatable, but I'll let it go. I appreciate all the witnesses. We're now going to recess for 5 minutes while we move into classified session.